In this video I'm going to talk about my favorite comic artist of all time, and that's Walt Kelly of the Pogo comics. In 1983 I first saw the art of Walt Kelly for the Pogo comics, and it was published in a magazine called Strip Profiel, and that's a little bit similar to the Comics Journal. It is a magazine about comics. And I totally fell in love with his drawing style. Later I bought this original, and that's an original daily comic from 1970. But first let's talk about the life and art of Walt Kelly. Walt Kelly was born on August 25th, 1913 in Philadelphia. When he was 2 years old, the family moved to Bridgeport. In 1930 he became a crime reporter for the Bridgeport Post and created his first cartoon character, P.T. Barnum. In 1935 he joined the Walt Disney Company to start as a storyboard artist and as a gagman. And 4 years later he became an animator assistant to the legendary Fred Moore. From 1936 until 1941 he worked on Pinocchio, Fantasia, The Reluctant Dragon, and Dumbo. In the short The Little Whirlwind, he animated the scene where Mickey is running away from the tornado. He also made a reference to his hometown when a copy of the Bridgeport Post blows into Mickey's face. In 1941 there was a strike at the Disney Studios. Walt Kelly did not want to choose sides and left the studios. For Dell Comics he started a series of nursery rhymes, and there he also developed the story of Pogo before he began with the daily comic. In 1943 Pogo made his first appearance in Dell's Animal Comics. Pogo looked like a real possum in those days and did not resemble the later Pogo. Before Kelly began the daily Pogo comic, he already established the characters. In 1948 he started as a political cartoonist for the New York Star newspaper. For the same newspaper he started his comic strip Pogo on October 4th, 1948. After a year the New York Star folded and Kelly's established a syndication through Whole Syndicate. Now Pogo was published in newspapers throughout the USA. Pogo was syndicated for 26 years. Walt Kelly took his inspiration from other artists such as George Harriman of Crazy Cat, A.B. Frost, and also the illustrator T.S. Sullivan. And you can see that in his work he did for a series of cartoons, and it later also became a book. And that's the Prehistorical Pogo and Pandemonia. And in the book he illustrated called The Glob. When you look at the caveman in this book, you see a slight resemblance to one of his best friends, Disney animator Ward Kimball. It's always interesting to see the development of a character. So the Pogo he started out with the Dell Comics really looked like a possum, but later on he changed the character style, and also his whole style changed during a period of 10 years. Fantagraphics is now republishing all of the Pogo comics in a series of books. There are now 7 books published from 1948 until 1960. They will continue to publish all the Pogo comic strips until the end. Over the years I have collected most of the Pogo books that were published. When I was in San Diego I found most of these books in an old bookstore. Walt Kelly also published this lovely book in full color, Songs of the Pogo. It had all the music scores of the record Songs of the Pogo. On the record you can hear Walt Kelly singing. I found these original drawings he did for that book. The colors were added with a transparent overlay. I first fell in love with the comic style of Pogo, so the art style. And when I started reading it, it's when you begin reading Pogo, it is a little bit difficult, but it is a dialect, because later on I discovered that the Okefenokee Swamp is a real place in Georgia. All the inhabitants of the Pogo comic talk in a southern dialect. Kelly often referred to the state locals such as Waycross, Fort Mudge, and Ware County. The comic revolves around Pogo, who lives in the Okefenokee Swamp. The comic actually started out with Albert Alligator in the Dell Comics. Pogo was later introduced. Kelly described Pogo as the reasonable, patient, soft-hearted, naive, friendly person we all think we are, in the 1969 TV Guide interview. Albert Alligator is a bombastic cigar-chomping extrovert and has a healthy appetite. He sometimes eats one of the characters. Howland Owl is a self-acclaimed expert. He thinks he is the smartest person in the swamp, but he always comes up with the most stupid ideas and theories. Churchy La Femme is a turtle and best friends with Owl. He likes to compose and sing songs. He's also superstitious. Every time Friday the 13th comes along, he panics, even if it falls on the Wednesday. Porcupine is a grumpy and cynic porcupine. He is best friends with Pogo. He can never tell a joke properly, and every year he brings Pogo a flower during Christmas. Miss Mamselle Hepzibah is a skunk who speaks with a French dialect and is loved by all the critters of the swamp. She is also in love with Pogo. Miss Beaver is a pipe-smoking washerwoman who speaks her mind and is best friends with Hepzibah. She takes care of a tadpole or a fish in a jar. She carries them around in the perambulator. These are but a few of the characters in the Pogo comics, but there are many more. In the 1950s, Pogo was the most popular daily strip in America, primarily because of its blend of slapstick humor and engaging characters. It was unique for its occasional forays into political satire. In 1952, he also ran a campaign during the election of Eisenhower, and he had a campaign for Pogo as well, to let Pogo run for president. And this is the original button from 1952, and he had a whole campaign also promoting the Pogo comic. When you look at the originals of Walt Kelly, you get a better understanding on how he worked. Over the years I have downloaded high-res images of Pogo originals, just to study. You can still find some great samples on the internet. Most of the time you can find them on auction sites. In the 90s I was visiting Lambiek comic store in Amsterdam. I was looking for some old comics and if they had some Pogo books. When I walked through the gallery I was struck by the original of A Pogo Daily. I instantly bought it. It's a daily from December 4th, 1970. It shows Pogo, Porcupine and Churchy La Femme. Kelly drew on a much larger format than the comics were published. This original was drawn on Bristol paper at the size 16.25 inches by 4.5 inches. He divided the daily comics into equal parts, so they could also be published in books. When you look at the Pogo books that were published during his lifetime, they were never published as a strip, but were cut up to fit in the pocket-sized books. When you look at the originals, you can see that he drew with a non-repro blue pencil. The advantage of non-repro blue is that with scanning or photographing the original, the blue would not be registered. There are not many sketches left because he inked over them. I have an original sketch of Albert Alligator. It's not of a comic but of the animation Walt Kelly made together with Chuck Jones. the Poco Special Birthday Special from 1969. I believe this is a drawing by Kelly, but it can also be a production drawing by an animator. Most of the comics are based around a log the characters are sitting on or leaning against. When the story has much dialogue, he would have the characters do something different altogether, to create more action. The borders of the panels were drawn with a ruler. First he would do the lettering in pencil. To align them, he would draw guides with a ruler. After the balloons were drawn in, he would lay out the scene and then refine the drawings. He inked with Winsor & Newton Sable Brush Series 7, number 2. The brush strokes are very lush and sometimes end up in dry brush. Kelly pinned his dailies on a drawing board, so he did not rotate his drawings while inking. When you take a closer look, you can see how he inked. I've made a special Walt Kelly brush to ink in the style in Procreate. I've added it to the brush set Stave Comic Inks. If you already bought the brush set, you can update it for free. The brush is also available for free as a single brush on my Gumroad. I'll leave a link below this video. We're just gonna take a closer look at the inks of Walt Kelly. And I just scanned in my original drawing I own, and now I can really zoom in. And I'm just going to concentrate on this panel. It's Porcupine, and you can see that he also uses dry brush. Just going to open up another file, and I've just made the original inks in a non-repro blue. This is the ink brush, which is called the Stave Walt Kelly ink. And it has two different modes. You can draw with it or ink with it with the tilt function of your Apple Pencil. And it's interesting to see, because his originals were pinned down, he had to find a way to ink it. And when he inked things like this, he couldn't rotate his original. So what he did, he would ink in parts. So first this angle, and then he took it from here. And you can see that in his inks when you take a closer look at it. So it's all in parts. So his hand, here's one stroke, here another stroke. And you can almost see, the strokes he made. Especially in the later years, his inks and also the backgrounds became much more detailed. So with this brush you can ink very light or small, or use the bigger brush. And of course with his hat, this is one brush stroke, because now you cannot go any further, and then the line will start to jitter. So he used the brush to his advantage. And here, also with the head, you cannot go further than this, because otherwise you have to tilt the paper. And then he would, take it up like this. And especially with the originals you can download, and you still can find them on the internet. It's great for studying, how an artist inked. He also used a dry brush, and with this brush, when you use the tilt function, you get a dry brush effect. And you can also, change the tilt of your Apple Pencil. And that's what I like about brush, because I worked on this brush for a long time, to have two brushes into one brush. So when you tilt it, it becomes a dry brush, and when you tilt your Apple Pencil up, it becomes the normal brush. And he inked on Bristol board, which has a bit of a tooth or a bit of a structure, and that's when you get these dry brush effects. And of course the ink would run out. Just ink the last panel, and later on he would become more detailed in his backgrounds, and that's from the late 60s until his death in 1973. So when you ink, you can do it like this, but then you get a different effect. So he would do it in parts, because you have to think if you're, inking with a real brush. Also his nose, it's just one ink line. He also would ink with very fat lines or very detailed lines. So with this leg, this is one stroke, then he would take it from there. Because here is the point that the brush would switch around, and otherwise you wouldn't get the smooth lines. So the feet of Porky or Porcupine. It's the same with the feet of all of the characters. You would ink it up and then the toe in a different brush stroke. And then you get a more loose effect for inking. And he drew this big because when you shrink down an original, the lines become more crisp. So here's Churchill La Femme. So this is not done in one stroke. It would, set it up to here and then finish it. Also with his shield. This is a great way, to study other artists just by copying it and just looking at the art and trying to figure out how they drew it or how they inked it. On the bottom of my original you can see some writing for the balloons. Kelly had several assistants he worked with over the years. George Ward worked with Kelly from the beginning. He did the lettering of the comics and sometimes he would ink the comics. From 1958 until Walt Kelly's death, an assistant called Henry Shikuma also worked as a letterer and inker. So it's probably Henry Shikuma who lettered this comic strip. George Ward started this type of lettering with a more calligraphic feel. Kelly enjoyed the lettering too, but due to deadlines, he let his assistants do it. In an interview with George Ward from the Okefenokee Star from 1977, you get a better understanding on how Walt Kelly worked. Walt once told that wherever he was, even at a bar with his cronies, he was drawing Pogo. What he meant was that he was thinking about the next set of strips he would be eventually getting at. Often Walt would put off working at his week's dailies until it was getting pretty late. That is late in terms of getting them finished and delivered to the syndicate. However, he seemed to be able to sit down and really create good stuff when he was under pressure, and also he seemed to work better when he got a little mad. The Sunday Pogo was another matter. He could sit down, lay in the pencil lettering and throw the rough pencil drawings in within 20 to 30 minutes. Tight penciling in maybe 30 to 40 minutes. And then he'd throw the page over to me. Most of the Sundays were inked by assistants, but most of the dailies were inked by Walt Kelly himself. The daily comics were published in black and white, but the Sundays were in full color. The Sundays were challenging to make. Newspapers could run the Sundays in landscape. In the book series of Fantagraphics, these Sundays are published. It shows the whole comic with all the panels. Newspapers in tabloid format could not publish the landscape Sundays, so the pages needed to be fitted to the tabloid format. So some panels needed to be deleted. Kelly created a fixed panel on the second tier that could be cut out. Then the editor could rearrange the panels to fit the tabloid format. Other newspapers could only fit 2 tiers of the Sundays, so the top tier would be cut off. Kelly needed to plan his writing so the Sunday could still be read without the top tier and the middle panel in the second tier. The colors for the Sundays were done by another company. They did the color separation with halftones and rasters, better known as the Ben-Day dots method. Kelly would make a copy of the Sunday and then hand color it with pencils or watercolors as a reference for the color separator. The color of Pogo needs to be a light yellow-gray, but it would end up in a purple-gray tone. Kelly would also publish Pogo books. They were a compilation of the dailies. Kelly would also produce special mini-stories and poems for these books. I also have a porcelain figure of Pogo, which was produced in Ireland by Wade. Walt Kelly made the designs for this figurine seen from all sides. Wade would send him the prototypes. To select the best ones, he would cut off the head, until he was satisfied with the final design. Kelly was also a lover of nature, and at the end of his career he also campaigned for a better world to stop the pollution. Walt Kelly died at the age of 60 on October 18th, 1973. But Pogo still lives on, in his beloved Okefenokee Swamp. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like it, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to hit that notification bell, because each time I upload a new video, you get a notification. Drawing is fun, and practice makes perfect. See you next time. Doodles!